What's going on, guys? I'm Eddie Knight. Welcome back to Nerdy Before It Was Cool, where we talk TV and film, especially ones that have to do with comic book characters. If you ask anyone around me, they'll tell you I'm a huge Batman fan, and you could also probably tell by the countless Batman reviews, news, and updates that I have on my channel as well. If you ask anybody my age and probably a little bit older, and you ask them what their favorite version of the character was, whether live action or animated, they'll probably say Batman the Animated Series. It was so good that it made it so hard for anything else Batman related to live up to that came afterwards, especially if it was animated, which gets us to the anomaly that not many people talk about. A really amazing incarnation of the character that came out in 2004. This was the first animated Batman series that had came out since Batman the Animated Series, so it had a lot to live up to. And I believe the creators do that, so they went with a completely different style, a completely different type of animation, and a completely different incarnation of the character as a whole. As to where Batman the Animated Series, as soon as we're introduced to Batman, he is a veteran, he is battle scarred, he has met all of his villains before, and it's just presumed that he already has a long, rich history with all of his villains. In this version of Batman, he's only been Batman for 3 years, which provides a lot of really dope angles that we didn't get to see in Batman the Animated Series. For one, he is young, he is still very hopeful. At this point, he's still kind of trying to have a life, although they make it very clear he's having a lot of trouble balancing a social life and trying to be the Batman, and he's going deeper and deeper into becoming that jaded, dark, more battle-scarred version of the character that we know and love in later seasons. I think the animation style was really dope and refreshing on this show. They went with a very drastically different style than the super duper dark, heavy shadowed landscape of the Batman the Animated Series. Colors pop a little more, everything's a little more vibrant, and things are a little more cartoonish, but still manage to keep a pretty consistently dark tone, but is very funny and goofy when it needs to be with certain characters. Especially in the first 2 seasons, they kind of got a little cheesier in the final 3 seasons, season 3 through 5. The consistency changed a little bit. They brought Robin in later seasons. The tone just eventually changed, but was still a pretty good and consistent show. And if the animation style looks familiar to you when you go back and watch it, it's because the same people who did that Jackie Chan animated series cartoon, I think it was called like The Adventures of Jackie Chan or something like that. I don't remember the name, but if you remember that show, that's the reason that style looks so familiar to you, because the same people who did that show actually did this one. And I thought they did an amazing job at completely transforming some of the characters that we have already seen countless iterations of before. I know a lot of people are conflicted on Mr. Freeze. They don't really like his kind of style. His helmet is not a helmet in this. It's like a freaking frozen chunk of ice. I thought that was super dope and innovative. Also, the Joker, man, this is one of my favorite iterations of the Joker. It's just completely different than anything we have ever seen with the Joker. They didn't go with the crime lord gangster version from the animated series. They didn't go with the imposing type of style that Nolan would later use for his Joker, or even any of the influence of the Nicholson type Joker. In my opinion, this Joker was the perfect blend of serious, scary, menacing, and goofy and campy. He almost looked like a freaking creature versus an actual human being. Really big yellow teeth, there's really big green hair. A lot of the times he wouldn't even wear his normal suit. He walked around in this straight jacket that had the colors of the Joker on it, and I thought that was really, really cool. Kevin Michael Richardson did an amazing job. He brought a completely different tone than I've ever heard used with the Joker.
Smear free. It's permaclown. Ooh, tough crowd.
It wasn't an impersonation of Mark Hamill. It was completely its own thing, and it really stands out over time for me because I haven't heard that type of Joker since. And I think it was its own thing. I think it was extremely well done. And man, I can't say enough how I just really love this iteration of the Joker. In later seasons, I thought the Riddler was extremely well done. A very of its era version of the Riddler. Wasn't campy, he wasn't goofy like the Jim Carrey version. He was far more serious far more menacing and far more of a looming threat than any version of the Riddler that I've seen, honestly. And honestly, we probably won't see the Riddler in that type of form, being that menacing, that serious, until the Batman 2022 comes out. The only character that I wasn't a huge fan of is probably the Penguin. I thought his design was good. I thought he looked really dope and true to comics, but with their own little bit of a spin on him. But I just felt like in the first season, he seemed like a huge threat. And then in later seasons, just not so much. Like the Joker stayed a looming threat. The Riddler stayed a looming threat when he was introduced. Clayface stayed a looming threat for a while when he was introduced. All these characters stayed a looming threat, but the Penguin kind of got played off for laughs and jokes throughout the later seasons. I'm not necessarily sure why. I guess just they just couldn't find ways to use him. I don't know, but yeah. Although I wasn't a huge fan of Bane's character design and how he looked, he was probably the most cartoonish looking, even though the Joker looked super cartoonish as well. It just kind of fit. But with Bane, he was so cartoonish, like so cartoonishly large. Like when he shot up his serum, he turned red. I didn't really get that choice, but you know, it is what it is. Even though I didn't like how he looked, I did enjoy every story moment involving Bane. Bane is supposed to be the one that breaks Batman, and his first encounter with Bane did just that. He broke him and had him ready to hang up being Batman. I really love and appreciate that how in this show, this is the first time he comes in contact with almost all of his rogues gallery. When we meet Joker, it's the first time Batman meets Joker. When we meet Bane, it's the first time Batman meets Bane. So we have no idea who these characters are for the most part, at least this version of them, and neither does Batman. And it just adds a really, really refreshing take to the character. Undeniably, the best villain in here in this series has to be old Clayface. It's a really, really dope iteration of Clayface, and this is probably the most tender love and care I've seen this character get in any iteration of Batman. I liked him a lot in the Harley Quinn animated series. I thought that funny take on him and being this struggling failed actor and just how they played him super over the top. I do enjoy that version of Clayface as well, but this one was a far more nuanced, a far more dramatic version of Clayface. I mean, this was Ethan. This was a detective on the case. I mean, this guy was best friends with Bruce Wayne. And what makes this crazy is him and Ellen Yin, the female detective in here. And side note, I don't know what this was about the 90s and early 2000s where like all the female detectives had really dark hair and always wore a red coat, just like in the Gargoyles and a lot of other shows. I don't know why that was a thing, but it was definitely a thing. Batman's still a vigilante in this show, especially the first 2 seasons. He's still a vigilante. He's being hunted down by the cops. He's being hunted down by his best friend who has no idea who he is. So we're seeing bits and pieces of him and Bruce's relationship throughout the show, which throughout the show kind of has a lot more strain on it just because Ethan is getting a lot of flack for not being able to catch the Batman. So I know Bruce Wayne has to feel pretty terrible about all the trouble he is causing in his profession. So we get a lot of character building with Ethan throughout the season. And at the very end of the season in a 2-parter, we get to see his transformation into Clayface. So Joker basically has this stuff called Joker Putty that can turn any surface basically into like a surface that he can mold into kind of whatever he wants. It makes everything super malleable. And one of those things busted and Ethan breathed it in. And we see over time him start to turn. He seems really sick and eventually he turns into Clayface, a really tragic villain because he was a good guy, one of the best guys, one of the really, really good guys on the force. So just to see that transformation from Ethan into Clayface was super dramatic. It was super heartfelt. And that's how I would describe this show, especially season 1. It had so much heart. And what I think this show did the best is juggling a brand new tone. They juggled comedy and humor with seriousness very, very well, especially in these first 2 seasons. I haven't rewatched the entire series. I only rewatched seasons 1 and 2 because I remember those being my favorites. Also, I have HBO Max, but for whatever reason, they don't have season 5 on HBO Max. But for whatever reason, I just really love how these episodes are paced, and I love the tone of this.
I think the Flying Graysons might have to change their name.
And they do a very good job at the very first episode of the series, Bats in the Belfry, setting the tone of this show. We see Batman running around chasing a bad guy. I love how they make Batman seem so mythical and unreal in this show, while at the same time driving home that he is not quite as polished as the Batman we have seen before, keeping in mind that he is only 3 years in. But yeah, the scene opens up with him chasing a bad guy and he doesn't say a single word. This bad guy is completely terrified, and the first words you hear out of his mouth is,
"How'd you do that?" "I'm the Batman."
That's some great TV. That's some great Batman. That's a great way to set up your character and show the tone. And they did the same thing while introducing the Joker in that first episode. Yeah, and I could really ramble on and talk about this show all day, but I really just wanted to make a quick video just expressing my love for this show. I have seen a recent kind of surgence of love for this online. I've seen V Infuso. I really like him. He did a video over this a while back. Also, the Brown Table. He's a really good video essay guy, and he does these things as well. I really loved his video on it. I've seen like a couple more, but that's really about it. I really don't see enough people talking about this show. And I think it's mainly due to that large shadow casted by the animated series that came out in the 90s, that anything that came afterward was just kind of looked as not as good. And that's just really unfortunate. If you look at it as its own thing and just try not to compare it to Batman the Animated Series, the difference between this show and Batman the Animated Series for me is when I was watching Batman the Animated Series, I was a kid. Batman the Animated Series really got my intrigue into the character of Batman and comic book characters as a whole. But this show was out when I was like a preteen / young teenager. I think preteen. I want to say I was like 12 or 13. So at this point, I was already full into these characters and just trying to learn as much about them as I possibly could. And this show had me every single day. I loved every single bit of it, even when they changed it up in the final 3 seasons and got a little bit more wacky. But anyways, I didn't want to make this too long. I just wanted to express my love for this show. Have you seen The Batman 2004? It was an amazing series with some amazing cast. They had voiceover work from a lot of people who have done previous DC work. It was just so much fan service and just so much new and fresh and refreshing ideas in this show. And I feel like it is just not talked about enough. But let me know in the comments, have you guys seen this show? What do you think about this show? Who were your favorite characters, your favorite villains? What was your favorite season or some of your favorite moments, man? Just let me know down in the comments. Let's nerd out over The Batman. My name is Eddie Knight. This is Nerdy Before It Was Cool. I'm out.
Destroying you is my game, and I won't have anyone stealing my fun.
So does this mean we're back in business?
I don't think anyone's telling secrets anytime soon.